Hello, and welcome to Office Hours. It's a show dedicated to answering your questions about media and virtual production. So here, you are the producers because our expert panel assembled here is here to address your questions. How do you ask questions? You can go to our website at officehours.global. There at the top, you can find the Join Us link where you can join our community and submit your questions. Also, note on our website, we have a schedule with special guests, focus topics throughout the week, as well as labs and training sessions that are available. The real benefit of office hours is the community. This is simply the time that we hold our office hours together. So Alex will be reading for us. Alex, what do our producers want to answer for us?
Yeah, our first question is from Andre Dola, and Andre asks, Josh, and Andre's from Berlin, Josh, do you have any interesting results for the community regarding the Rooms NDI tests yesterday?
Okay, and Alex, you want to explain maybe the arrangement that we have for testing?
Yeah, so basically we're setting up a situation where, basically between 3 and 6 p.m., you can come in and test your NDI rooms. So if you have NDI, if you want to test Zoom ISO, you want to test NDI out of Rooms, what we're doing is encouraging people, and it's starting to turn into a little bit of a happy hour with everybody because it's a Friday afternoon, at least in California, and people are just dropping in from all over the world and hanging out with us, and so people can just talk about whatever they want. The most important part is that they're there, they have their audio on, they have their video on, and they're all chit-chatting. So I think this could turn out to be like a big party, on Friday afternoons or Friday evenings or Friday nights or Saturday mornings or anyway, somewhere in the world. It could be a lot of fun. So again, those are at between 3 and 6 p.m. on Friday Pacific Standard Time. And we generally frown on people using Zoom ISO or Zoom ISO or doing other things that would require record outside of that time. So we wanted to give people a large window that they could use to test if they wanted to, and enough people to do it. It's very hard to get the right number of people to do all the testing. So expect that to happen every Friday between 3 and 6 o'clock. And a lot of what we were doing, I can't get into all the way right now, but we're just doing a lot of stress testing and routing testing with Zoom ISO right now. And so anyway, it's pretty exciting. Yeah, we had everyone rocking back and forth. The reason, by the way, that we asked everybody to rock back and forth. And it wasn't just so that we could make Mitchell look silly, but it was. That was the initial reason. But then after that, it is if everybody's rocking back and forth, it's a very hard thing for Zoom to do. So not Zoom, WebRTC, and any kind of compression and everything else. And Mitchell was our fine guinea pig who made it all work at the beginning.
It was quite the sight to see the entire gallery.
It was funny. There's a whole gallery of people going back and forth. You have to see Fridays. I think Fridays are going to be fun. The reason that's useful is because it's changing so many pixels all at one time. And what we can see is, it puts a lot of stress on Zoom ISO or anything else, but also we can see frame loss. So if there's frame rate drops, we can see those frame rate drops much more clearly when someone's rocking back and forth. So anyway, that's why we did that. So there you go.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Just one of the. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
Well, I was just saying, one of the many benefits of our benefits that would only be of advantage to our technical crowd. If we have NDI Zoom Rooms testing day, this is a very eclectic group. So Andre asked me about my specific instance. If anyone else who'd done testing would like to comment on their testing, feel free. Specifically, I was using full overkill Zoom Room so as to try not to have my Zoom Room be a limitation in any way. So I have a full regular box PC. It's a 3700X Ryzen with 32 gigs of RAM and 10 gigabit Ethernet connection between the computer that was providing the Zoom Room and the streaming computer, and a dedicated graphics card. What I noticed, although my export, I was going from the Zoom Rooms of the latest iteration that has the ability to do 6 1080p's and 12 720p's in principle. I've noticed in my testing that I was able to get up to 8 pins. My export was going to OBS. So OBS plugin is the NDI 4 as opposed to the NDI 5 that Zoom Rooms generates. For that transport, I was able to get 8. I was not able to get the 9th pin for whatever reason. I had tested previously, and I was able to get more pins, but they seem less stable. This one, I was able to get more pins. They seem more stable, but I'm prepared to do some more testing as well. Guy, did you have your hand at it as well?
Yeah, I was just going to say that's one of the reasons why I like being able to have as many people as we can to get in there, because we can start to crank the number up. Right now I'm working on getting my network up to 10 gigabit, which is proving to be more expensive than I thought it'd be. So slowly I'm buying all the pieces of the puzzle. And so the cheaper way is to go 2.5 gigabit or 5 gigabit if you can, because in the cloud, we have 25 gigabit connections on the back, which is insane on these machines. So throughput's never an issue whatsoever, but here to save the money from the cloud cost, because you can basically wind up spending more in the cloud than you would to just buy the machine. So I went ahead and just bought the machine. And so having this opportunity to, run these tests to saturate it and see what's going to happen, because each feed is 50 megabit if you're at 1080, according to Andy. It's not, so 1080, 60 would be about 120 megabits per second on a traditional video feed, but they're using, I can't remember the term that he called it, but it's something different where it's 50 megabits coming out of each feed of the Zoom Room at 1080. So if you get 8 feeds, you're eight times 50, 400.
I don't think that. I think each feed is a maximum of 6 megs right now.
No. Once it's converted to NDI, it's 50 megabits.
Okay. But what it's coming out of the Zoom is 6.
Yeah, but once you kick it out, I mean, that's what we're talking about is NDI. So yeah, you could quickly saturate a 1 gigabit port, and ideally you would have a second connection. So you can, again, this is why I love testing, because you'll see it moving that head side to side. If it doesn't move smoothly, you know that something's going on. And there are some NDI analysis tools that you can see what's happening with those packets to see if if it's at the send side, if it's at the receive side. So there's actually a course that you could take, an NDI performance networking course that tells you about some of these tools and how to use them. That's not the only one. And I can put a link to some of these in the chat if anybody's interested.
Yeah, thanks for those details, Guy. Likewise, I did configure my access manager to make sure, because there were multiple connections I did have to the Zoom Room box. So I did configure it to go over the 10 gig LAN. So I think I did that right. One thing I think I will try later is the groups. I just simply configured each port to talk to each other, but I might try the groups because I noticed that there's different send and receives that you can adjust on that. All right, fantastic. Let's go to our next question.
Our next question is from Andre Dolly, and in Berlin again. And he asks, is it possible to have a continuous Zoom meeting or webinar for a whole week?
Go ahead, Alex.
And the answer is no. You can't have it for the whole week. So you can, there is I think that it is 36 hours. I think it's either 36 or 48 hours that you have to refresh a Zoom meeting at least. We haven't tested the webinar, and we haven't tested the meeting either, but we know that it's more than 24 hours because we've done that. But we think it's less than 48 hours, and we should probably turn one on at some point and just let it run and see when it ends. What we are planning to do in August, and we will finally get to this in August, is we will get rid of the webinar that we have now, and we're going to basically go into after hours and stay in after hours. The interesting thing there is that there will have to be each day just to keep it fresh, so that we don't have this automatically turn off. Is we'll have to refresh with a webinar. So we'll turn one webinar off. One meeting off and turn the next one meeting back on again. It'll all happen in a minute, and we just have to pick what time. So they'll be like, it'll be noon Pacific Standard Time or midnight or 5 p.m. or whatever it is. I think that we should have some flags and some music and, kind of, for those of us who are old enough to remember channels going down, just have there's a little end of channel thing, and then
Jimi Hendrix playing the national anthem.
Just finish that up and then turn it off. and then we'll turn it back on again. So I'm going to put a call out to the remotes to think about something that's very classic, classic end of day, but with their own twist to it. And that could be a lot of fun. So anyway,
After Hours has ended our broadcast day.
Yeah, exactly. We have to have, we can do a whole, please come back in 1 minute.
We're gonna do tryouts. Say, you can submit your entries. Go ahead, John.
Can't hear you, John.
Zoom just posted their time limits for Zoom meetings, 30 hours.
Oh, 30 hours. Okay, there you go. So yeah, we'll do it every 24 just to keep it on the same clock. If we did it every 30 hours, it'd be just slowly moving through the system. I think we'll keep it to every 24.
Yeah, we've got a little 6-hour lenience there, just in case we're late.
Exactly.
All right, next question.
Next question is from Sky Gleason in Seattle, Washington. And he says, Sky asks, what inspires your imagination and how is it helpful in production?
Go ahead, Sky.
I ask the question because oftentimes we can't imagine something going wrong, or we thought we'd rehearsed it, we practiced it, but the consequence was beyond what we could even expect. So I'm inspired by this question because of after a horrible accident that happened on Apollo system, and again the NASA person in front of the Senate hearing said, "I'm sorry, Senator, we just didn't have the imagination that would happen." And so that's where I see the value of imagination being in, not in, but when something happens. And so that's why I'm inspired by the question. Also, where do I get my inspiration? Oftentimes either TED Talks, because they are cross-pollination of ideas and solving problems and or creating something. And then I still do a lot of podcasting, usually around the house.
I'll admit your explanation is a little darker than what I was imagining. Go ahead, Mitchell.
I love watching YouTube TUTS tutorials. For example, I love Andrew Kramer over at Video Copilot. He does such wonderful things, and he does them in many cases procedurally in After Effects, which means that we're not relying on buying somebody's specific plugin. And I think that's very interesting. So you see one of his tutorials, and then you get to thinking that maybe I can use expressions to do something interesting, and you try to minimize your code and make it clean and interesting. That to me inspires me because I'm learning to do different things with something I've had as an old friend for 20 years.
Go ahead, Alex.
Yeah, I think that for me, adrenaline a lot of times is really useful of during the event. Now, the thing that's really important is to think about it after the event. So the postmortem is probably, from a learning perspective, one of the most important things that you'll do. And there's two parts of that. One is I'm constantly writing down everything that isn't working during a project. So this didn't work. We ran out of this. This person, got COVID. This person, whatever, and we didn't have a solution for that, or we didn't have a backup for that. We didn't have this. The client asked for this. We weren't ready for that. And I spent very little time writing down what worked because I got that. I already did that, right? The part that I didn't do was the things that didn't work. There was missing something, and so I want to fill those in. So I encourage people on the cruise to do that as well, and we write things down. And then usually within a week we do a postmortem. Oftentimes, if I'm on site, a lot of times I want to do it at dinner that night. Like I'll buy everybody a good dinner. We're all going to sit around. We're all going to talk about things that didn't work. It seems like it's a rush, but it really helps you think through those things. And, I always think, the thing is after you've done, the problem with Apollo is they were only doing an actual execution once every year or every 6 months or whatever. Their iteration rate was very slow, very low. And that's one of the really hard things to deal with is low iteration rate. So the thing that works about this show, for instance, is that we built up a lot of muscles because we do it every day, and we get used to it, and there's a pattern to it, and so on and so forth. And so, but I always think when someone says, I didn't imagine that could go, you can't imagine that things are going to go wrong. And I always think of like the Han Solo thing. Well, I can imagine a lot, so I can, but that usually comes from lots and lots of lots and lots of experience. And usually what we call is just scars. We have a deep scar somewhere that says, don't do that anymore. And that was somebody, closed a door on my fiber. Somebody pulled a plug out where they didn't, belong. Someone ran a forklift over one of my converter boxes. So someone, like all those things. But then you think but you seem neurotic when you're doing a live show because you're constantly moving things out of the way and constantly throwing little tantrums about where things are. It's because there was a scar there. Like there's a scar that was there and there and there and there of, these are bad things that happened. And so then you have to get to a point anyway. So that's from what inspires me though, is that after doing a lot of those things is looking at other people and how they talk about it. Like I find that we were talking about it before the show, the ILM thing is so good. Light and Magic on Disney Plus is so good. Like if you're not watching it, you're crazy. Like, it's just so good. They have little diagrams of how things were put together. So, it's not just that it's great interviews and great behind the scenes. They're showing you what they had to think about and how they had to do it. Anyway, it's just amazing.
That's great. I noticed several references to Star Wars. That's great. I have something similar to say to that, but I see Peter jumped in, so I'll let you weigh in first. Peter, go ahead.
Sure. I was looking at it. The question, as I sometimes do a little differently, what inspires? I do a lot of work with Cub Scouts, and I find nothing more inspiring to my imagination than listening to a bunch of 8, 9, and 10-year-olds think about how they want to do something, and then trying to figure out, okay, I have to, to use the old Mork and Mindy line, reality, what a concept. I now have to figure out how to take their imagination and put it into how to make it real for them so that we could video them doing what they want to do. There's nothing like an 8, 9, 10-year-old imagination, I think.
Go ahead, Sky.
Well, we keep talking about bad things that are happening. And again, one of the podcasts I just listened to that inspired me to ask this question was a belief. Do we believe that bad is means that we shouldn't be doing something? And they took it into stress within athletics and how often we need to, push past a stress thing. And actually stress is a good thing. And I immediately thought, as being an actor, yeah, that nervous tension that you get just before you go on stage, if you learn how to not let it debilitate you, it's kind of the secret sauce. And Alex, you talked about adrenaline, but obviously if you're only running on adrenaline or you become an adrenaline junkie, then you've also got a balance issue there too. So I see you're coming in after. So I'd love to hear your reflections on if it's a bad thing, does it mean we shouldn't be doing it, or it just means we need to do it differently, or is that a part of the process?
Good, Alex.
The goal is really to fail, is to fail where you can fail. Like, so you want to do things. And that's what I love about office hours. And one of the things I love about office hours is that we're failing forward together. We're doing projects together. They're not all coming out perfectly, but they're a place that we can do that. Like, I work on events. I have an event this weekend that we're working on and it can't fail. Like it just can't. And so, so you have a lot of people and you have a lot of planning, and you try to minimize everything that could possibly go wrong. And you're not trying to fail forward. You're just trying to get it done. You got to find places where you can fail forward. So this is where when we work with nonprofits, when we do office hours, when we do experiments, we bring concerts and things that we've done here. Even the cooking stuff that we've done, we did that. We did that for free for Man in the Kitchen because it allowed us to fail. Like it was a place that we were going to play as hard as we could not to fail, but we needed to have it like, well, you can cut our pay in half, like if it doesn't work, and you need, and we were doing somebody, so you want to look for places that you can do that, because that's where you're going to come up with new ideas and new processes is in these complicated things that aren't all going to work, but you got to have a place to have them not work, and I think that is, and absolutely, like in a gym, you want to push to failure. You don't necessarily want to push to failure when you're competing, you want to push to failure when you're in a safe environment to do that.
And I'll weigh in as well. So I think that some things that I would like to do artistically challenge what I can do technically. And so I might have to learn new skills or learn different disciplines in order to accomplish something. Maybe something I've seen in broadcast, maybe some graphics, something I've been inspired by and wanting to bring that into my productions. Or maybe I'm short on personnel, and allowing some automation into the system allows me to push the number of personnel that I have further on the same amount of resources. So yeah, lots of things. I think it's one of the nice things about our industry is that we can see things and not just be driven by the technical, but also the artistic. Thanks for the question, Sky. Let's go to the next one.
Next question is from Darren Sorello in Dallas, Texas. And he says, question for Alex. On yesterday's show for Posterity, you mentioned that you are going back to paper for some of your more vital photographs. Was wondering if you can share which photo printer you are using, or are you using a service to handle this? And I am using a printer, and it is and I think I can find it. It's right. I can't quite see it. And I'm not sure if I can. It's a what I'm using to print this out is a Epson Stylus Photo R2000, which I bought a long time ago. So anyway, so it's the R2000, and it's a nice printer. So on archive paper, it will print relatively large prints, very, very high quality. And my whole idea here is this is the archive printer. It's like $1,500 or $1,600 or something like that. But it's going to print the final photos that I'm putting, and that's all I use it for. Like, I don't use it for printing documents. Like, it's just the ink is really expensive. So I just print out photos, out of there, and they come out, and I have to say there's something really special. You print a photo and you look at it and like, oh, it's really nice, like compared to just a screen. It's just, there's something about it, that physical photo coming out of the printer that's kind of amazing. And so I'm really happy that I'm starting to do that again. And my goal is by the end of the year to print all of my photos. One of the big things that I'm trying to do is, with me, there's never like I'm just going to do something. It's like, I'm going to print all the photos from the past over this year. And then next year, getting my kids to give me photos of the stuff that they've shot that they want to print out so that we have those. And then I'm trying to figure out, and I don't have an answer for this, but how do I first my family, my brothers and sisters and my parents, like, let's get all of those photos scanned. I'm thinking of like literally going out and just, rather than asking them to do it, just bring everybody's photos over. We'll all sit around and talk, and we'll scan all the photos. And then, because a lot of them, that's the only version of them, and we're not going to send them to Scan Cafe if it's the only version that's there. Scan Cafe is great, by the way. That's a great service that you can use to send like loads of slides or stuff, and they'll send them back to you. But we can, I want to make sure that they never leave wherever they need. I don't even want people to send them to me or even give them to me. Just bring them over, I'll scan them, give them back to you. So I'm not responsible for it. And then, trying to get more of the extended family to do the same thing, but build a big database that all of us can, have those photos, or at least have access to them, because there's so many photos that were on my grandparents' living room that, they're gone. Someone moved them. We don't know where they were, but they were there my entire life until like 2 years ago or 3 years ago. And so you want to save those.
Yeah. So Alex, are you using those for archive and display, or just archive?
I'm just using them for archive. Like I mean, we do print them. I do print them, and we put them on the walls and stuff like that too. I'm mostly concerned about archive, of just knowing that they're all there somewhere, that somebody has 2 copies. Like, I'm working on building basically 2, copies of these and keeping them in 2 different places, so that, if there's a fire or whatever, that those photos just remain, because I really got clear. I was reading something about it, and it's just like, it's unclear whether, this may be not the society that's the most remembered. This may be the society that is the least remembered. We're one big CME from losing every picture that we've ever had. So anyway, it's just a kind of a, yeah. So.
I was going to mention the CME protection. How is your data, and how does it fare for CME?
There's no data. There's no real protection if you're in the line.
It almost makes me wonder, though, what the information density is of a printed photo. One big QR code to back up data that's going to get squashed with the radiation from the CME. Yeah. Be something worth looking at. Go ahead, Mitchell.
You guys are depressing. I like Alex's point that you have that picture in your hand and you're looking at it and you can feel it and touch it and look at it. And sometimes if it's on a shelf in a frame somewhere, your eyes may rest on it for a moment, and then you have a remembrance of an old dog that you had or a family picture, and it's very, very tangible. You can't accidentally erase it like you can on a photo album. It's not flash paper. It's not like you snap it and it goes in a puff of smoke and it goes away. So I like that. I like having it in my hand.
Nice, Mark.
So we have a couple of the Epson printers, and I will say it's a good idea to exercise them every once in a while because we've let them go between projects a couple of times for years, and you end up tossing them. You can't really clean them once they've sat for a while. But I thought this would be a good opportunity to talk about what dots per inch should you be scanning in to then take it out to an inkjet printer for archival purposes. Is there a better format, like a TIFF versus a PNG versus a PDF?
Yeah, I mean, I think that I also use an Epson scanner, and I can't. I think I mentioned the last time. Usually when I search, I can find it. The Perfection. I think it's. Let's see here. I usually know it if I look at it. I think it's an 850, and I'm not sure. Hold on, I just have to try to find it. Was the nicest scanner that Epson made when I bought it. But I think it's the V8. I think it's the. Actually, I think it's actually the 600. I don't think I got the V850. I think the 850 is after when I bought it. So, and this one, I scan everything at the highest resolution. So this has got an optical resolution. The hardware resolution is 6400 by 9600 DPI. I'm gonna turn it all the way up because I'm only gonna do this once, and so I'd rather take that original scan and drop it down, then I know a lot of people that will scan at 300 DPI, or they'll be like, well, that's the, technically your printer, you're probably on a regular piece of paper. Anything more than 600 DPI is probably not going to make any difference, over if you're going to keep it at the same, because you're probably scanning past its resolution. But I prefer to just turn it all the way up. Now, this scanner can also do slides, which is a whole different DPI requirement, so you can put slides in there and scan them. And that's why that really high optical resolution makes sense. And it has an interpolated, resolution of 12,000 or something, but you shouldn't do that because it's just, that's interpolation doesn't mean anything. And so for a lot of the stuff I've scanned in the past, it was all 600 DPI, because it's 600 DPI is, I think of it as, the tightest line screen that I would have would be 300 DPI. Would be that would be incredible line screen, and that's into 600. When I was doing print, we always made sure that our image was minimum of 1.5, whatever our line screen is. So the line screen is when you're printing in a publication. So a newspaper might be 95. Line screen. A fine art book might be 300. Well, 200 line screen. Not very rarely do you see 300 line screen. So if you're at 450 DPI, you're probably over anything that you can print. If you're at 600 DPI, you're probably the reason you might again go to the higher ones. And again, I tend to scan very high and then put them on is because you may want to. The problem is that the image itself, depending on what it was printed on, may not have any fidelity past 600 DPI or 12. And it's something that, because I'm getting back into scanning right now, maybe we'll do some tests. We'll take some photos and we'll scan them at 600, 1200, 2400, 3600, and just see where does the paper, because you get into this thing where the paper isn't any more resolution, doesn't have more resolution. There's nothing different in the image other than you have lots of particulate that you've picked up.
You start to dump too much ink. But what about bit depth?
Bit depth is I think that the one that I have here is 12-bit. You want to get as much to bit depth as you can because there's a lot there, and when you give that up, that I would consider 10-bit to be minimum, 12-bit to be really good. 16-bit is optimum if you can get it. That's going to give you a ton of color, because the thing is you're, a digital copy, analog is this, right? Of whatever that curve is. The digital copy is little stair steps, and it's just how small those stair steps are. So the stair step, when you're talking about those stair steps are the higher the bit depth, the smaller the stairs, but there's always stairs. And so you want to get those stairs down. And the same problem with audio and video and everything else, those, the color reproduction. So that analog, the bit depth is probably more important than the resolution if you're going to do color correction on it, because it's infinite on those prints, because there's so much that ink was doing while it was, interacting with the medium.
Print was the original media. Let's go to our next question.
It's stone. I was just writing something the other day, some marketing material for something, and I said media has been moving the world since 4000 BC. So because it's like when they were cutting it into the side of a pyramid, or into a pyramid, that was media. They were recording stories, is just on the medium that they had. So yeah. Anyway,
they print or write. I don't know. Oh.
Right. I think that they wrote everything, and then they started using emojis. And so then they just told all the stories in emojis, and then someone said, "Hey, we got to go back to print. This is crazy." So anyway,
here we go. What's old is new again.
Yeah, exactly. That's all hieroglyphics are, is Egyptian emojis. All right. So Douglas Carmichael asks, when hiring people with disabilities or health issues, what may have created gaps in their employment history? How do you evaluate them?
Go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, really what we're looking for is, does it kind of match the job description, and can they do that role? So we have something called roles, goals, and KPIs. So that's how we check and see, is that person a fit for that role? So the way that it was explained to me is, if this is the candidate and this is the job description, either it's a fit and it fits dead on, or it's a mismatch. And so you'll know as you're interviewing somebody, is it lining up or is it completely out of whack? And so what we're looking for is, can the person do the job? And ideally, they're coming in with a referral. Those are the best, somebody, because people tend to rise up and they act a little different, and they're showing up because their aunt, their uncle, their colleague from another organization referred them in. If there's a gap, I'm still resorting back to, are they the right person for the job? We'll usually go through a couple of different people, and we'll do 2 or 3 steps. Usually candidates don't get to me until they've gone through a couple of rounds. So I don't get to see a lot of the first round people anymore. But I mean, it comes down to, how do they show up and can they do the job?
Yeah, I had similar thought. I think that metrics like these, depending on the organization, where they have to scan a bunch of resumes and come up with metrics to be able to narrow down the people that actually get the interviews. Maybe these things need explanations. Maybe they're interested in them. But I think a lot of our hiring kind of goes the way that Guy describe things. People are interested in, can you do the thing? Or what practically can you do, as opposed to, things that are on your resume, your credentials, or, what's on your paper as far as statistics are concerned. If you've solved a difficult problem, then you should be able to know all of the intricate details that you did, how you went about it, your methodology. Those are practical things that, if you make it to an interview, your employer is likely to be more interested in than anything that may have caused a gap in your employment. And I see also Mickey's comment in the chat had a nice thought too. It says, see if they're able to deliver good, hard work that I would expect if they can work well with the existing culture. A gap in employment can be filled with personal projects and voluntary work to be able to build up a portfolio of new things to add to someone's CV. Alex, you want to jump back in?
Yeah, the key is if you have that gap, is to fill it with something. The hardest part is not having anything in there. So working with other teams, volunteering, building projects. You want to show what you did during that time, as opposed to, I was looking for work, or I was and now there's some gaps that are the health wise that you may not be able to do too much, but wherever you can show some progress, it definitely helps because you just want to be able to talk to things intelligently. You get into an interview and you want to be able to, assuming that you're interviewing for something that you know the subject matter, you really want to do everything you can in between to know that subject matter. And theoretical knowledge is somewhere between 100th and 1,000th as valuable as practical knowledge. So it's almost worthless, but it's not completely worthless. And so you need to turn that theoretical knowledge into practical knowledge, which is the real value of what you need to do. So doing it is really the thing.
Yeah, I think some metrics are probably more valuable than others, but that's probably there's probably more valuable metrics. Let's go to our next question.
Next question is from Robert Green in Los Angeles, and Robert asks, I'm traveling to London next month for 10 days. What do you suggest for a data service on my AT&T iPhone 13 Pro Max?
Good, Sky.
I just posted in the Makana the response that I found, and I believe this is the same system that I used 2 years ago when I went to London. And what was beautiful was we did all of our planning on Google Maps and consequently had that right there. And it was about $10 a day, which was very surprising. And then it says no more than 10 days. So I guess they max out at $100. But again, this I put the link in the Makana, and it's called the International Day Pass. So give that a shot on AT&T.
Thanks. Go ahead, Alex.
And I traveled a lot with AT&T, and so I just had an international plan. So you just pay, and I didn't have to. I think it was month to month. It wasn't something I had to do, so I just turn it on for a month and have it on. The data gets expensive if you're not careful. So you have to. So one of the things that you get really good at is knowing where all the Starbucks are because they all have Wi-Fi. So it's a key. It's a really great marketing for Starbucks because I have a thing in the back of my head. If I drive past a Starbucks, my brain will just remember that there was a Starbucks on this block. There was a Starbucks on this block. Because I know that I can walk in and get Wi-Fi and sometimes coffee. So, but it's knowing where Wi-Fi hotspots are useful, and there are a lot of them in London. So it's relatively easy to get from one Wi-Fi. I've survived London in the early days before I knew that there was an international plan to AT&T. I could survive London without any cellular, just by bouncing from one Wi-Fi. And I would cache. There's maps for London that will cache onto your phone. So you can actually, when you're in Wi-Fi at the hotel or whatever, you can cache all of London to your phone. They're a little, they're not as good as Google Maps. But if you need to find something you don't have and you don't have a connectivity, you can. So in the early days of going to London, I would use those often, to do it. But as I had more budget, I just got the international plan.
Nice. Peter?
Well, the other option, of course, is always swap out the SIM card for a UK SIM carrier like British Telecom or Orange if you're in Europe. I've done that before. Matter of fact, I believe the Pro Max actually supports dual SIM. So you could actually have a SIM local to the country you're in and then just pay their data rates, which probably are lower, to be honest with you, than $10 a day.
It's nice that the radios are talking a lot more these days. Go ahead, Alex.
Yeah, another thing that we did often was E3. That's another cellular provider I believe it is, or did they just get bought? Anyway, when I was there, E3 was the one that would let you do month to month or let you have a short term. A lot of them won't. So they'll want you to have a local address. They'll want you to, commit to a long period of time. But with E3, we could pay $100. Now, this wasn't the cheap solution. We pay $150 and get a little MiFi that had an E3, and then we would hook our phone to that and go from there.
And Dennis Champion Walker mentions in chat, underground stations also have Wi-Fi provided by Virgin Media. All right, let's go to our next question.
Next question is from Paul Valhus, and he says, is Wyze a serious home security system? How do you integrate it with a NAS?
Good, John.
The answer is no, Paul. It's not serious. That's the wrong adjective. Wyze is the best value to use, but I wouldn't call it serious. And integrating with the NAS, I don't know. I know you can't do that with the Nest system because it's encrypted from cloud up to from camera to cloud. It's encrypted, and so you have no way to store it locally. I'm not sure about how the Wyze system works.
And Courtney?
Well, I have a couple of Wyze cameras, and I don't use them with a NAS. They do have local recording. You put an SD card in them, they will record locally on the SD card, but I'm not sure that they have an interface to network address storage. They have Cloud Connect, which will you pay extra for that service to monitor the system and save stuff to the cloud. And you get a certain amount of that for free, I think, and then you have to subscribe to it. But I don't think they're able to address a local NAS, only the little SD card that you poke into the camera.
It's good to keep in mind. Let's go to our next question.
Next question is from Tlaloc Miguel Lopez Waterman in Brevard, North Carolina, US. And Tlaloc asks, does it require a different NIC adapter to use Dante with an M1 Mac Mini? It seems Todd Reynolds ran into this recently.
Let's have John and then Mitchell.
I had the same issue. They do not support the Apple 10 gig NIC. And so whether it's a Mac Mini or whether it's an iMac Pro with the 10 gig does not work for Dante. I'm running Mac M1 Dante on a regular 1 gig card. That meter bouncing over there is running via Dante from the Mac Mini. So it works. They just don't support 10 gig. It's an Apple thing. It's supposedly a driver issue.
Go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, you can uplink another switch. Obviously, you will if you're doing power over Ethernet, because your main one may not be that. And I've done that fine, plugged right into the same Mac with no problem, M1 Mac Mini. But as I went down the line, I just decided I wanted to completely segregate the Dante network. And I've done that through using a Satechi hub attached to my M1. It has a Ethernet jack on the back of it. I just run that right over to the other switch.
And the one that you haven't had trouble with on your Mac Mini is that a 1 gig or a 10 gig Ethernet?
It is a 1 gig.
So the 1 gigs work fine. It's the 10 gigs that don't work. The other issue is be very careful with Dante on the M1. So like we've had some catastrophic problems with it. So not like little problems, but like catastrophic. So there's still some issues there. It seems to be somewhere in the Apple MIDI where it at the same time interprets it as 32-bit and 24-bit. And we don't know why. But what it does is it successfully writes a blank every 96,000. Is it Courtney? I think Courtney helped me look at it, but I think every 96,000 samples.
No, it was 96 bytes of zero. I think it's ever 47,000 samples. Yeah.
Yeah, and it just draws a blank, and it's not that it's a gap that you can close. And you got to get this is happening many times a second. That's not very many samples, and so it just makes it's the worst comb filter you've ever heard. So anyway, it's an interpretation problem in Dante and the M1, and when you do exactly the same thing on an Intel machine, it works just fine. So there's still some wonkiness there that you just want to be careful of when you use M1s with Dante.
Interesting. So maybe not the best deal at this point to go for the 10 gig NIC if you're intending to use Dante. Let's go to our next question.
And the last thing I'll say is just that it doesn't happen all the time, but you always want to test your records and test your system. We haven't figured out what causes it, but it's definitely connected to M1s and Dante. Next question is from Jonas Dottel in Stuttgart, and he says, what is new on the latest update of the firmware for the BMD cameras?
Good guy.
Yeah, I installed the 7.9.1 on my G2 camera. You could see it running here. I do have a USB-C drive hooked up, and you'll notice how fast it is now to go from power off, and I'm going to flip the switch. So here we go, flipped, and here's the camera booting up. And look at how fast the drive mounts now. Mounted, and I'm going to shoot. I'm hitting record or recording. And stopping, no lag. So it's way, way, way faster than it used to be to use these USB drives. So that's the biggest thing that I've noticed in the update.
Is there anything else listed in their notes, or is that pretty much the big thing?
There is a bunch of notes, but the rest is not as relevant for what we're doing. Here's it says improve reliability of recording to the USB-C cards, improve reliability of updating the camera software, which I hooked it up to just USB-C right to my computer and updated it, and it was super fast. Fixed an issue with some of the clips that were raw that wouldn't preview if you're playing back in the camera. So that's another issue. And then there's some 4K stuff with the motion sensors. But yeah, that doesn't really, well, if you have a 4K camera, then these other ones will matter for you. And then there's some other stuff for Blackmagic RAW for the GH5 and BGH1.
Go ahead, Scott.
Just checking in. Is that new update good for both the 4K and the 6K camera?
Yeah, it's for both.
Awesome.
Fantastic. Let's go to our next question.
Next question is also from Jonas Dottel in Stuttgart, and Jonas asks, how do you control a PTZ camera with an Xbox controller?
Guy?
Gonna have to switch gears here. Let me grab the
double header
Xbox controller. My hands are kind of full, but let's see if I can get this thing lined up. So you can see this is the Xbox controller and NDI Studio monitors running here. So the cheap, basically free way to do it is just open up NDI Studio Monitor, and if you attach one of these just cheap gaming monitors down at the settings, you'll just turn on PTZ settings, and then your controller will pop up. This is on a Windows box. I haven't been able to get it to work on my Mac, so you can see it right there. And once you've got that checked, you could then, push left, push right, up, down. And so you're seeing my BirdDog control here as well. So I have all my picture control and whatnot. One of the things that, for those of you who are looking at using the Xbox, there are just some regular controls that you can use. That, I don't think a lot of people know this. They're pretty fascinating. You can use the arrow keys. So if you're in Studio Monitor, the Xbox is cool because, you can zoom in here. Actually, is that zoom in? Let's see. Oh, I clicked out of it. So you got to be in the app for it to work. So that's up, down, and then zoom is up like that. That's back. And as you move slow, so like if you move really slow, I don't know if you could see that. It's almost imperceptible. But then there's these keys here that if you hold down the control key, so like with the arrow keys, pan, tilt the camera, hold control for higher precision control. So I'm going to click in here and I'm going to hold down the control key. Now I'm blocking my shot. Here we go. Control, and now I'm pressing control and the arrow at the same time, and you're seeing that same imperceptible, or not imperceptible. I mean, it's definitely perceptible, but it's very, very slow. And so you see also that we have these other controls for toggle on and off autofocus. So I think if you're not going to get one of these, controls, or if you don't have a PC, using some of the keyboard shortcuts inside a Studio Monitor is still pretty cool. But if you're doing a lot of this stuff, it's pretty neat to set up the presets and, some of these these are only like $59, but they work. And that's what I found to be the easiest way, is to just use NDI Studio Monitor.
Nice. Thanks for that, Guy. Let's go to our next question.
Next question is from Morgan Price in Victoria, British Columbia, Canada. And Morgan asks, the panel has recommended the smaller Lilliput monitors in the past, like the A11. What about their larger monitors, like the BM154K and larger? What do you recommend in this range?
All right, Sky and Courtney would like to weigh in on this.
I should let Courtney go first. I was going to do the alternate would be the Feel World monitors, but that's not really your question. But if you need something inexpensive and small, and also different sizes, the Feel World is a inexpensive solution. But I know Courtney's going to answer your question.
Well, I don't have, sorry, I was waiting. I don't have any experience with that particular 15-inch monitor. I do use Lilliput monitors in my in some of my video playback gear, the ones that are the 7-inch, and they're much more versatile. I found them much more versatile than the Blackmagic ones in the same size, in the 2-up and a rack mount. And the 15-inch also seems to be much more versatile. If you look at the back of the inputs, it takes HDMI, it takes DVI, VGA, and SDI on the S version. So if you get the S versions, it has all of those inputs. So you can pick and choose from whatever kind of signal that you have. So you could hook up a computer to the VGA input and an SDI input and switch between them. So it's very versatile. It also supports, according to its specs, it supports HDR over the HDMI inputs, HDMI 2.0, and its 4K panel, IPS panel. So it looks pretty good. So I've been pretty pleased with the Lilliputs that I have. They're the smaller ones. So I'd say they're 15-inch, which is also can be powered off of 12 volts from a 4-pin XLR. So it's good for portable power. It has a travel case you can put it into. They're coming to get me. So it seems to be designed more for production. So it's good, a good production monitor, I'd say.
Thanks. Let's go to our next question.
And our next question is from James Babbitt in San Diego. And he says, "Hi, Alex. Excellent gray matter show with Michael Krasny and Amber Mack. Will the podcast be available on Apple Podcasts?" Raise my hand real quick. The answer is yes. Yeah. It'll be available next week, probably Wednesday of next week on there. But there's already 3 episodes there. So Amber Mack was the 4th one. We also have Richard Haas, who's the president of the Council on Foreign Relations, was the last one. That was last week. And before that, Larry Diamond from the Hoover and Stanford. And before that, Robert Wachter, who is an expert on COVID. And so the things have, Michael Krasny's, his Rolodex is very deep. so there's a lot of, and the conversations are really amazing. It's a really, he's someone who's done something every day. Like we're proud that we've done something every day for, 2 years. He did something every day for 28 years. So he's been, and it's just the smoothness of how he just jumps into the conversation, starts it and turns it into a show that a lot of us that grew up in San Francisco all know exactly how the show goes and how it looks. The big change is that the viewers can actually ask questions. Now, you could do that when you were watching San Francisco, but it was like a big mess and it was people on phones and stuff like that. We're using, of course, Mukana. So people are able to ask questions. Now, it took a little while for us to get that working. So people would ask a lot of questions and we wouldn't get enough of them in. Now we're trying to bring as many as we can in. And yesterday we didn't have as many questions as we could have. And so I think that, I would highly encourage it. You'll see us post stuff in Discord. I'm going to go ahead and post a link to sign up for the next one. We're trying to kind of line up with Fridays at 11 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. I would highly recommend jumping in because the office hours folks are going to not, at least for the first year, not have to pay anything for it to have that access and be able to ask questions. That's not the way it's going to work over time. So for everybody else. So I would highly recommend jumping in and coming to some of these shows. And we will be rolling out or Mike will be rolling out a membership for it. But the main membership is going to be a Discord like ours, as well as being able to be at the live event and ask questions. That's the special part. The podcast will be free. So, and we think it's a really interesting business model, by the way, from a podcasting perspective of you can listen to the podcast, but if you want to be part of the conversation, both in Discord and during the show, you'll use it there. Now we're using webinar for that, and with events and kind of a love-hate relationship with that. So anyway, it's we're just used to a lot more hardware and a lot more smoothness. So you will see us figuring that out a little bit. But I think yesterday went really smoothly, and we had some great questions from our audience here doing it. Now I'm going to go ahead and post the podcast link in there, and again, it's Gray Matter, and I just put that in the event chat. And also, if you just go to graymatter.show, and either spelling of gray will get you to the same place. So anyway, those are the places to go for that.
Thanks, Alex. And if you're watching on YouTube and just finding out about us, there are a ton of office hours adjacent programs and training that we offer. that's made up from the office hours community. So if you do get the daily email, you'll be informed of that, as well as visiting our website at officehours.global. Let's go to our next question.
Next question is from Morgan Price in Victoria, British Columbia. And Morgan asks, how do panelists approach promotion of live events? Thinking for education events for me on social media. I have a new social media student intern.
Go ahead, Alex.
There's a couple things. One is thinking about ancillary content. So I'm not a big fan of lots of advertising and stuff like that. That can kind of work, but it's a pretty expensive solution. What you want to think about is ancillary events around whatever you're doing. So this may be tweets, and with all of these things, the hard part is there's very little you can do in social media that you can turn on a dime. Social media is not it's not a promotion for an event. It's a campaign. It is building up followers. It's building up connection. It's building up, the interaction with your audience. So it's not going to be something that you can just turn on a dime, but having an intern there makes it easier for you to start doing some of the other things. So you can be posting, I don't know what the subject matter is, but you can be posting educational material to TikTok. You can be posting tweets out about relevant stuff. You can also do things like I'm working on putting it together. And by the way, if you're interested in this, reach out to me on Discord. Putting together a Flipboard team. So we start putting up a lot of the stuff we talk about here on Flipboard because I know it's old and most of you haven't heard of it, but there's a lot of people using Flipboard. It's done. It's a big platform, and what it does is it gives us a place to put article links. It basically is an RSS reader that you put article links into, and then people can get up every day and look. That's their news. Like our goal this fall will be to make office hours there'll be a quote unquote online newspaper that is office hours that is just on Flipboard that you can just go up to, and we're not writing it all. I mean, we might insert stuff that we write over time from our website, but a lot of it will be, we're putting in other articles that we think you might want to read. So things like that. It's mostly how do you serve your community? You're doing educational events, but how do you serve the community every single day? Like, how do you bring them value? How do you put those together? And so that, you can also be doing things like short things on TikTok, short things on potentially, I'm a little bummed that Instagram is really going towards video because I think Instagram is really nice as a still platform, or was nice like that. But using Facebook, I wouldn't lean into Facebook as much as other things as far as trying to do live events on Facebook, but it's a great way to, talk about things and gather things. The other thing is get involved with other communities. So if there's a Facebook group that's connected to what you're doing, go in there. Don't spam anybody. Hey, this is what I do. Look for how your posts are going to serve everybody and really serve them, not kind of serve them, but also promote what you're doing. Just focus on service. Focus on being useful, focus on giving them content that they're excited about, and then repetition. Like, we do this every day. I don't recommend it. I really don't. I don't recommend doing what we do. We got into this habit. It's great for us. We can never go back, but wow, is it a lot. And we needed to do it to get this good, this fast, by doing it every day. But I would recommend either once a week to get started, or maybe just 5 days a week to get started. I love what we do, and I could never give it up now. I'm in a pattern. I enjoy getting up in the morning, hanging out with all my friends. But I think that it's a commitment. Like, you just have to know that it's an infrastructure, and not meeting people's expectations is a pretty damaging thing. So we move very slowly here, partially because we're managing expectations. We're trying not to fail everybody very often.
Yeah, nice points, Alex. I can add on to that a little bit. I would classify promotion in either an external way or internal. So externally, you're advertising, you're promoting, you're reaching out to individuals through the different channels, some of which that Alex mentioned. Internally, when you have events, if you don't have a white label program, you can put what production company is providing this, or little graphics, things that are tastefully done, something that's not going to detract from it. But an example of this is the little promo that I gave for the last question. We're here, people that are tuning in, they may be interested also in some of the other services that we provide. So sometimes the internal promotion can be more effective than external sources. Let's go to our next question.
Yeah, the next question is from Tlaloc. Sorry, a couple window problems. Tlaloc Miguel Lopez Waterman in Brevard, North Carolina. And Tlaloc asks, when you have options for your Dante Network's clock leader, which is the best hardware to choose as your clock leader? Go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, I'm kind of new to the Dante world. I'm using it for my Studio Technologies 205. But all these Dante products use the IEEE 1588 Precision Time Protocol, PTP. And you can select any of those devices on the network to be the leader, but the best one is the one that's probably the biggest. So I picked the biggest actual box that have the best time code in it to lock to. If you have more than one in there that wants to be the leader and everybody else wants to be the follower, Dante will actually select it based on its position and speed on the network that you're on. So in my case, it's simple. The 205 Studio Technologies is the leader, and all my Avio Dante modules that allow it to go to different formats are the followers. It's pretty simple.
Want to follow up with that, Alex?
The suggestion from Mickey has rolled in. The Studio Technologies Model 5402 Dante leader clock with GNSS synchronization, and I will have to agree with Mickey. It's a great leader.
Thank you, sir. And let's go to our next question.
Next question is from Joe Kidd in the Bay Area, USA. And Joe asks, good morning. For stability and reliability, which is your absolute favorite PCIe nVMe controller to marry with the built-in M1 Thunderbolt controller?
Is favorite the same as best? Go ahead, Mark.
Well, I'm not sure about whether this is going to tie right in with the M1 controller, but I've been using the SanDisk Extreme Portables. They work well. I know OWC has an Envoy Express where you can take your own M.2 and put it in a case, and it'll connect through Thunderbolt, so that might give you faster throughput. But I'm not sure about talking directly with the M1 controller.
Go ahead, Alex, and then perhaps Mitchell.
Yeah, I haven't had any that are Thunderbolt controllers, so I have to admit I haven't been able to. Haven't had that. Haven't done that with drives. If you're talking about small drives, these are INEOs. These are just enclosures that I put the NVMEs in, and then for a larger rack, I've been using the OWCs. These are the OWC 4M2s. These are 4 of the NVMEs that are in here. To be specific, though. SSD, NVMe, it's very complicated. Anyway, it's a long story. But these are the enclosures, but they're all USB-C.
Go ahead, Mitchell.
I have that Satechi hub that sits right underneath the M1 Mac Mini, and it has a built-in NVMe bus that you can plug the NVMe memory into. So that works really well for me because it's all built into the same little footprint.
I think that's actually the one that I meant. That's SSD, I believe. I think it's a SSD on a chip, not NVMe. And I know that because I think I damaged an NVMe putting it in there. Damaged the Satechi.
I haven't done that yet.
Okay, there you go.
Thanks. It's better for someone to do your testing for you. Let's go to our next question.
Next question is from Andre Dolly in Berlin. And Andre asks, did panelists already have the opportunity to play around with the new Constellation HD 2ME or 4ME switchers? Pros, cons, dislikes?
So looking around, has anyone had the opportunity to try them? Alex?
I think that they're just getting out there. I think that there's some folks that are planning to test them that haven't gotten them yet. So I think they're just shipping out there. Do you have any guy in stock?
We've had them in stock. They fly out. I know that George Kennedy wanted one last week, and I had it on Saturday when he called, and it sold over the weekend. But yeah, I haven't had a chance to dig into it. John Barker has a nice video on.
That's great.
go to our next question.
Next question is from Hasmukh Gajar in Cape Town. And Hasmukh asks, Alex, in Gray Matter yesterday, Michael appeared to have a challenge with his audio. What was the problem? We did see you fix it in person. What is the studio setup, and does it require you to be present for recordings? So we saw, we think that we forced an upgrade to join the webinar. That forced an upgrade onto our laptop to the newest version of Zoom. We think that there's a problem with that new version of Zoom and how Zoom interacts with USB devices. So the symptoms that we saw on yesterday were when Zoom launched and the MixPre was plugged into the computer, Zoom would just lock up on looking for audio devices. Like it says, do you want to join audio devices? When you click on it, it just, literally just spinning ball, will not respond, done. Like it's just going to sit there and wait. It stops waiting as soon as you unplug the MixPre. So as soon as you unplug the MixPre, it immediately went, okay, I now have your internal audio, whatever. Then I plugged the MixPre back in and it worked fine. So there was something about how it was interacting. Now nothing's been done to the MixPre. This is exactly the same laptop we've done everything else in. So the only variable that we know of that changed was Zoom. And then after that, so then it worked fine. Then it started to click, which I didn't notice, and then Michael was like, it's getting, he's writing me notes like it's getting staticky. And I thought, it's a little staticky. And we asked Shannon, can you hear that in the webinar? And she's like, no, I can't hear it in the webinar. So we were like, okay, well, we'll just kind of muscle through it. And then I realized, that's our recording of Amber. So, so then we stopped and I unplugged the MixPre, which I would not recommend it, by the way. So usually what happens is I have a USB interface, and we all know that the first thing you do with a USB interface, if it's quote unquote crunchy, is unplug it, plug it back in. Well, I unplugged it and forgot that I didn't have a battery pack on the back of the MixPre. So I just unplugged it and the MixPre just turned off in the middle of the recording. In case you're wondering, it did close the file. like the MixPre. John's told me that it will close the file, but I was like, because I opened it up later, I was like, I might have just toasted the first half of the show. And didn't do that. Then it worked. It worked okay through the rest of the recording. A couple things there is we had a backup, which is that we were recording in the cloud. So we had the Zoom recording. We just don't want to use it if we don't have to. We also had, because Amber has a very evolved production pipeline, she has a local recording. So her production person just sent me this is the link to the 3 terabyte or 3 gigs, whatever of her talking. So we have a return signal from her. We have a what we call a double end, and Michael's recording on the MixPre was perfect. So we had a backup to the backup. And so there's nothing wrong with the podcast will sound fine. But it was a big learning thing that we're going to have to now dig into to see if we can reproduce the error on the MixPre as it relates to it. And it'll probably mean that I'm building a new way to do this. And so I just have to figure out exactly how that's going to look. So because now I don't have confidence in the production pipeline. So there's going to be a couple of things that I have to figure out on how we're going to do that. I may add an X32 to the thing, like, because I have one sitting next to them there. So anyway, so that was it. The current studio has been a temporary studio that we've been, just kind of setting up when Michael comes in, and that creates a lot of stress. So over next week, before the next one, we'll have a more permanent setup that's kind of built into it. I need to be able to have meetings when I'm in the office as well. So it's not so we're basically going to try to build that out a little bit more effectively. So anyway, that's what I need to have a place to be on meetings, and we need to have something better for Michael. So I'm just going to build something up that looks a lot like, not exactly, but a bit like what I have here in my house, and have it down there. The good news was we did do it down there because I was thinking about trying to do it remotely, or start to do it remotely with Michael. And I lost internet in my house, or I was out of the house, but the house lost internet right when we would have been doing the show. So Comcast cut a fiber or something like that. So anyway, so all of it turned out, there's lots of backups to things. We are hoping to eventually have Michael be able to do it from his house. But again, there's all these things that it's nice having a building with a lot of internet, to do this in. So, and he's only 10 minutes from the building, so it's really easy.
And Mark, did you want to weigh in?
I just wanted to ask if Alex knew if the computer that was connected to the MixPre 3 was an M1 based computer or Intel based.
So 14-inch Intel MacBook Pro. So from 2020. So it's not particularly new, not particularly old, and we've been using it for every other show. So it's been constant. I won't use the M1s for this specific thing just because of the previous issues that I had.
Thanks for sharing that, Alex. Thanks, Hasmuk, for the question. These cautionary tales are very helpful for those of us in production. We prefer them over success stories. Let's go to our next question.
Next question is from Craig McFarlane in Boston, Massachusetts. And Craig asks, what would you love to see as an open source app or technology, especially for organizations that don't have big budgets?
Courtney?
What I'd like to see is Adobe loosen the purse strings a little bit and make Photoshop 7.1 open source, because it was the last version of Photoshop that didn't strictly enforce their licensing has become such a problem with Adobe licensing. I know they make Photoshop Elements as a good starter version, which you can purchase and put on a computer, and it's cross-platform. And as well as their video editing software, Premiere Elements. And it's $99, but I've bought that and put it on a couple of computers. But the problem is the licensing is so draconian that it has to check home every time you launch it. And if you have more than one computer that you want to put it on, it becomes problematic. So I'd love to see them open source something like that. That would get you into the Adobe world. It would create PSD files and read Adobe Illustrator files and render them into bitmaps. It does all of those great things. It does basic bitmap editing, which would be essential. I know there's GIMP and there's other open source challenges, but it wouldn't necessarily get you into the Photoshop world directly as a good starter package. And I think they would be wise, since so many people have pirated it anyway, to go ahead and open source that older version to get people into the Photoshop world, and then they can sign them up for the take money out of your wallet every month version.
Yeah, I wonder, Courtney, sounds like you're springing more for open license than open source for Adobe as far as their.
Yeah, they wouldn't necessarily have to open the code source, but open license or make it publicly available. Yeah, open source licensing. Like a common. What do they call it? Common source? No, open source licensing.
We'll see. We'll see how that works. Let's go to Alex.
I have to admit, not a big open source guy. And the reason is that I feel like there isn't oftentimes there's just not an impetus to keep on moving forward very effectively. And so it's really hard. Very, very few open source projects, in my opinion, that without a steady rudder, they just don't move very fast. They don't fix problems very well. Because there's no one making money at it, and people are using it and they're contributing. I think Blender is actually a pretty good success story in that area of an open source project, but that's also because a ton of corporations are dumping money into it. Like millions of dollars are coming in from everything from Epic to Apple to other folks are giving them money to keep moving that forward. So I think that there is I think that works. Marathon is open source. Bungie made it open source before they were bought by Microsoft, or right before they bought Microsoft. And I would love to see some updates to Marathon. It may not be a productivity tool, but man, it's so much fun. That's all I got to say.
Mitchell, do you have any ideas?
I'd love to see a replacement for Chiron become open source. Just something simple that'll work with every program, including Zoom and ATEM, just so you can type stuff on real easy without having to go into Photoshop and create alpha channels and bring it back in and do all that kind of stuff. Just something that jumps in there.
I think there are some tools for that.
Casper CG and SPX are already there. That's what they do. And our graphics here sit on top of SPX and Casper. So for the graphics, but those are open source, and I think they're open. I think SBX is open source. Is that right? Is it open source, or is it? Because I think you're paying Tuomo to do things for you with it, but I don't think that I think the software itself is free, I believe.
I think there are
there's
tiers of it.
There's tiers.
Yeah, I believe there's tiers to that software.
But there's a base version.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think according to the question too, Craig's question was geared mostly at companies that were starting out that don't have budgets for things. You might look at just scaling what you can do within the resources that you have when you're first starting out. Sometimes if you're making your decisions based on the cost of it versus something that might work in your workflow might make for a rocky launch when you're just trying to get going and solidify your reputation as a startup.
I would say that the most expensive thing in most companies is labor. So when you do something, a piece of software or hardware that's less expensive but takes more time to execute, sometimes you're not measuring that well, and it may be really expensive software or hardware. And if people don't like to use it, or if it takes a long time for them to execute things that they would normally do faster, you may have found that you spent very little money on the software, but the amount of labor, and it's an invisible cost oftentimes because everybody's taking 30% longer to do it. You don't see it. It's hard to measure. It's hard to see the difference, and it just is bleeding you out from a productivity perspective. And I think that a lot of inexpensive and free software, when you calculate labor costs to manage it, it ceases to be as inexpensive as it looks.
I only get so many slogans per show, but I'll use one here. Say quality doesn't cost, it pays. So we have room for more questions if you like. We have a very talented panel, so if you'd like, go ahead and put some more questions in as we round out the top of our hour. Let's go to our next question.
And by the way, a note from Morgan Price: SPX is open source, but the templates are not open source or not free. Next question is from Brett Dicus in New York City, and Brett asks, is anyone using a smart home device or system to monitor water usage in the home? And if so, are you happy with its performance?
Go ahead, Alex.
I only want to add that I'm really interested in this. The only water device that I have right now is when I forget to turn off the hose into my pool, I get an email from PG&E saying, "Hey, there's a lot of water." So anyway, what are you doing there? And so that's going to be expensive. And so anyway, but the hard part is figuring out how do you manage all the water coming into the house, and how do you measure where you have to put something there that's actually measuring water throughput. So the problem is a little bit more complicated. Having it on a hose or on a specific thing is one thing, but having it on the entire house, I think is, I haven't seen a great solution for that that's easy to install.
What's the latency like on that alert, Alex?
It's about a day. So it's about $60 is what it is. That's the latency. The latency is about $60, in case you're wondering. It doesn't happen very often, but it happens about once a quarter. I'm just like,
it gets quicker than most of the ones that we get too. Courtney?
Yeah, exactly.
I don't have one, so I can't speak of any experience, but I did do some research into this, and there's this one called Flume that seems to be a lot cheaper, and it clips on to your on the output of your water meter. So you have to have access to wherever your water meter is, and clip it on on one of the feed lines. But you do not have to plumb it. You don't have to cut a pipe and insert it as a flow meter. It must use some type of ultrasonic sensing of the flow of the water within the pipe. And it runs on batteries, so you do have to deal with replacing the batteries once a year or so. I think it uses lithium-ion batteries, and it connects to Wi-Fi, and so you monitor it on an app. And the responses are pretty good to it, so it might be worth a try. It's $199, and I don't think it requires a subscription anymore. So they used to require a subscription for it to use the app, but it'll monitor your whole house water usage and will detect leaks and so on, inform you if you have a leak, or if you're and chart your water usage from day to day or month to month or hour to hour if you need it.
Yeah, I know. I wonder if those are effective. I know if you're leaving your home for vacation or such, it's good to turn off your water. So if one of your major appliances break, you don't end up with water damage and a large bill. And I wonder if those smart devices could be trusted to do that, or if you'd prefer to be old fashioned with it and just, turn
This
the
particular
valve.
device, since it clamps onto a water pipe, but it doesn't interrupt the water pipe, can't cut off your water. So if it detects a leak and you're not home, there's nothing you can do about it other than to call a neighbor or something, have them go over and shut off your water. But it doesn't automatically detect a leak and allow you to remotely shut it off. So that's a problem with these remote ones. A lot of the others do require you to actually insert them in the line, which means you got to have a plumber in to disconnect your main water feed and insert the meter into the measuring device into the line. So and some of those also have a cutoff, automatic cutoff valve if they detect earthquake or if they detect sudden water usage, like a catastrophic break in a water main or something.
Yeah, I wonder if this one might have an API that attaches a house key and a phone number of your neighbor in it as well to complete that gap. Let's go to our next question.
Next question is from Albie Lopez in San Antonio, Texas. And Albie asks, when archiving family media such as photos and home movies, where is it recommended to store? Cloud provider, local server?
Go ahead, Alex.
I'll tell you what I'm doing. So I'm getting a Synology. I'm trying to figure out the size right now. So right now they're just on drives, but I'm about to put them on a Synology, and I'll end up getting two Synologies. And right now I think that I'm going to try to get them to I think I'm going to go for 48 terabytes, I think is what I'm looking for. And so the idea is to put them on two different drives that I will eventually move one drive away, and bring it back, every month or so to back it up. Because that archive doesn't move that much. The most important images that I'm using, and again, on these drives, I'm going to put a bunch of stuff on them, but the folder that actually has the files that I most care about is no more than 2 terabytes. The things that I want to have. So I'm planning to put most of the historical stuff onto literally a SSD drive and then just send it to my parents. Just go put this in a safe place. Like this is, and that's just to make sure that it's somewhere else. The most important ones I'm also putting up on the cloud. So I'm going to put it into iCloud for more of my data. Right now I'm hemming and hawing between Backblaze and Glacier, to basically Amazon's Glacier, to just throw things up there. My goal is to never go get them. They're just up there. I'm not trying to get them all the time. I've got other places for them to be. I just want to know that they're somewhere in the cloud to make that happen. Then again, I'm putting them onto the Synology drives, printing the pictures out there. The one place with the movies, for the older movies on discs, I'm going to send those out to a service, because that's one place that you don't even want to put them into a deck if they're more than 10 years old. Just send them to someone who knows how to look at them and do what they do. And so I'm not sending very many out. I have this, I don't even know if I'll get it off the tape. I have a trip that my brothers and my father and I took 30 years ago. It's still sitting in there's a little tape sitting there. And I'm like, I wonder if we can get anything off of it. So we're going to try to recover it. And the worst part is I digitized it in the mid 90s, and then I've lost that drive. I've lost that drive because I wasn't thinking about that, and it would have been nice to keep that because it was a full resolution digitization of the file. So anyway, I was like, I have a MIDI 100. Let's pull the file in for no reason, and then of course it was a really huge file. I mean, I'm sure it was like a gig. And I was like, what am I supposed to do with a gig? How do I move a gig around? So anyway, so those are the things that I'm doing. Generally, it's what's generally recommended is 2 physical locations, 1 cloud location. That's the basic. You're going to put it in two different physical locations in 1 cloud, and you should generally, if you're going to lose it with that level of redundancy, you've got bigger problems. There's bigger problems in the world than your photos.
Yeah, Courtney?
Yeah, but how do you deal with file obsolescence, file format obsolescence? And, I've got lots of disk drives from the, 80s and 90s that are pre-IDE and their MFM drives. And if I had stuff stored on them, you can't even find a card that'll read them these days. And
I think you have. So the reason I'm trying to get them into some large storage units is so that there's always that transition period between the old and the new. And I just know that there's going to be a moment where I move a bunch of files from the old file format to the new file format. And it's just going to be, every 5 years, every 10 years, I'm going to have to move
assuming
something.
You're going to be alive, though. That's the problem.
Well, so
for archiving,
for
your
archiving,
descendants may not know how to do that.
It's an Epson R200. Like literally, for the videos, I don't know what to do yet. But for the stills, I'm going to start printing these all out as so that I have these collections of all the photos that matter to me in pristine. And
as a proof paper and
yes. In a folder, I don't know if I can keep it in an environmentally controlled space, but generally they'll last a long time after that.
I don't know, Courtney. The original Time Machine movie, they spun the little disc and kind of figured out how to play the stuff off of it.
Yeah, isn't that amazing that in the future that formats will not become obsoleted in 5 years?
I have a whole TV show I'm writing for that. Finding old.
Fantastic. Mitchell, do you want to jump in?
I'm with Courtney. I've got a bunch of Jazz, remember them, and zip drives. And I know they're deteriorating just as they sit on the shelf, but I don't have the drives to run them anymore. I
have some zip drives that there is a zip drive, I think, to USB. I think there's a newer, it will read a zip drive to a USB. And I had the zip drives at one point. I was like, oh, I got to pull the stuff off of these just because there's nothing good on them, but just fun stuff. But then I bought the drive, the USB to zip drive, and then I lost the discs. And so I haven't had them both in the same room for, ever. So too many moves.
I'm in trouble because they're Media 100 files anyhow. So there you go.
Yeah.
Good old iOmega.
One thing I do want to say is that always export the highest resolution from your Media 100 or your Premiere or whatever and archive that program. Don't assume that you're ever going to be able to open an old project file. You can hope, but hope is not a strategy.
Right. Let's go to our next question.
Next question is from John Merrill in Phoenix, Arizona. And he says, I'm looking at PTZOptics and BirdDog PTZ cameras. Any comments between the two?
Guy?
Yeah, I have the BirdDog P200 behind me. Between the two manufacturers, they're kind of two different leagues. It depends on what you want to do and what your budget is to how many cameras you want, because a lot of people want to get 3 cameras to get 3 different angles. So you don't want to tie up your whole budget just in one. One of the biggest differentiators is the codec itself. If you are using NDI, there's full NDI with BirdDog, and that's why people love it, is because you get all this clarity of color. The first time I saw it, I was like, wow, that there's a major difference in full NDI versus NDI HX as far as the bit depth and how much saturation you're able to pull off. So, just watch some videos, look around, see what other people are using. You're asking good questions, but there's also, Canon, JVC. I'd avoid some of the Chinese cheap knockoffs unless you hear really good things about them, because the software is another thing to really look into. And then the support, if something goes wrong, can you send it back in? And you've probably heard me say it before, but trade shows are a good place to go to if you can actually see these things in person, because sometimes the zoom range, so if you're looking at a 12x versus a 20x versus a 30x, how far can you get back if it's a sanctuary and you're trying to be 60 feet back and get a head and shoulder shot? Can you achieve that at the resolution that you want? Because some of these will be 4K cameras, but then they're window sensoring in to get you that extra reach. So it just depends on the shot you want, the look you want. So there's a lot more to it, and feel free to reach out to me in after hours or Discord, and I'll be able to help further.
Fantastic. PTZs are a great resource for expanding our personnel to something that more we could do to have to man the cameras. Let's go to our next question.
Our next question is from Paul Valhus in Austin, Texas. And Paul asks, any comments on the technology depicted for All Mankind about the alternative history mission to Mars on Apple TV?
What? They went to Mars? Okay. No spoilers. I'm only one season in on this show. Go ahead, Mitchell.
We're here in Delaware. We're very proud of our involvement in the actual Apollo missions. A company called ILC Dover, which used to be a Playtex factory, built or made and designed the original Apollo suits. So I was watching carefully when I saw For All Mankind whether or not they were true to that. And for the most part, they were, but they weren't exactly right because there's a number of different variations on the original suit. But I think they're doing a pretty good job of showing an alternative history. Now that they're heading to Mars, it's anybody's guess whether that stuff is real or not.
Okay, Courtney.
Well, I haven't seen For All Mankind, but I did work on a pilot for a TV series called Mission Control. It was going to be a half-hour comedy about the first moon launch at NASA. And so I was tasked with creating all the graphics to go on all the monitors and displays in Mission Control, in the main Mission Control room. And the writers were writing this stuff about, graphics displays of the moon lander coming down and problems that are appearing on the screen with things flashing. And I pointed out to them that's supposed to take place in 1962. And I pointed out to them that there were no computer monitors in 1962. And the director came back and said, "Hey, this is supposed to be hysterical, not historical." So, I had to make the graphics anyway, even though there was no such thing as computer graphics. They had flashy lights back then, but graphical CRT displays didn't really exist till 64. So there's that kind of anachronism. And Hollywood does take a lot of license with the technology just to make it a little more exciting and to appeal more, add more drama,
This wasn't an alternate timeline that could explain away the advanced tech there, Courtney?
Well, it was kind of alternate timeline because it had a woman in charge of NASA, which wouldn't have happened in 1962 as the flight directors. Yeah, no.
Good, Mitchell.
Courtney, you going to throw some old Nixie tubes in there for an alphanumeric readout?
We did have a lot of the original consoles that were used from NASA with the buttons and the switches and everything. Everything was pretty accurate except for the CRTs that we stuck in there, which were Sony's, which were more recent and that we could synchronize to the camera. So.
Yeah, there's being a space nerd, I guess I should answer space man. There's some things that are a bit of anachronisms that I saw in the first season. They had the space shuttle as the orbiting the moon. There's some logistical issues with that, but maybe they could have figured that out. They had the lunar landers that they had doing point-to-point moon hops, which is cool, and it could totally happen. However, they were using hydrazine on there, so they'd probably have to bring the fuel from Earth, which would be pretty expensive, as opposed to the hydrogen that you'd expect them to be using from in situ stuff. But I'll spare you any further geekery for that. Thanks for the question, Paul. Let's go to our next one.
Next question is from Douglas Carmichael. The US NTSB found a lack of manual flying skills to be a major factor in the Asiana 214 crash. As the systems we work become more automated, how can we make sure core competencies, which can save a project in a case of failure, are not neglected?
And thanks, Douglas, for the question. He submitted this one about 3 hours before the show, which is fantastic. We didn't have a lot of questions there. I did get an opportunity to look at some of the material there because of the link, but I'll let Alex weigh in on it. Go ahead, Alex.
Yeah, so what's interesting about it is that I was in a landing on that strip, not when it happened, but maybe a couple months later. And it was a United flight, and we came down. And I used to fly in and out of SFO a couple times a week, and so you just know what it's supposed to look like. And I suddenly looked at it and going, "We're way too close to the water." I just saw we're way it was like, "Oh, this is not good." And I suddenly got really tense, and literally at that moment, the plane pulled really. And what happened was it was really dense cloud cover, so you couldn't. They were doing an instrument landing, onto it. And what's interesting about this is that the pilot immediately just jammed it, and we did a fly around. And so my instincts were correct that we were way too close. Exactly what happened to Asiana, which is that they got too close to the ground and they didn't make that adjustment. What was interesting is because the cloud cover was really thick, the pilot went up and said, "Yeah, we're going to go back in. We're going to do an automated landing." And so literally, instead of trying to do it again with instruments, the pilot just let the plane land itself. Like he just I'm just going to let the plane do its thing. And the funny thing about planes when they land with an automated, so I was talking to a Boeing engineer, he's sitting next to me, and I was on a flight, and like, a lot of interesting things that happens when you talk to a Boeing engineer. One of them is that he said, I was like, does the cell phone really bother does the cell phone really affect the flight? And he goes, oh, that hasn't affected it for years. He said, but the thing to remember is that if the reason you really should turn off your cell phone and turn off the cell when you're in a plane is that the cell phone goes to maximum power for the entire flight. And that does two things. One is it runs your battery down. If anybody's ever left their phone on, knows that your battery's gone by the time you land. So the second thing is it's an enormous amount of radiation compared to when it's in a normal working thing. So part of it is, he goes, probably not good to be, if everybody leaves their phone on and they all go to maximum quality. He goes, normally putting your phone against your head in a normal environment is probably not dangerous, but if you did that as a frequent flyer all the time, probably give you cancer. Like it was just like, that was really interesting. Like, they don't say that, but he goes, you might want to think about it. It's a lot of radiation. He just kept on saying it's a lot of radiation coming off that phone. The second thing he said, it was that the landing, I said, so the rough landings, that's the computer, right? And he goes, oh, no, that's the pilots. He goes, the pilots do the rough landings. But when you hit hard or whatever, that's a pilot landing the plane. He goes, when the landings where you barely even know you hit the ground, he goes, that's the computer. The computer just can drop it down. And he goes, and I said, well, can the plane take off? I mean, he said the plane's not good at taxiing. So the computer's not good at taxiing by itself. And so there's a lot of things that can go on. There's little things running around in front of us and everything else. But if you point it in the right direction at the runway and hit go, the plane can take off and come back around and land wherever you want it in the world without any interaction, and it'll do it better than the pilots. I said, well, why do we still have pilots? And he said, because if the computer fails, you need the pilot. We have the pilots fly everything almost all the time except for cruise control. And we only do the automated landing. They do the automated landings once a month to make sure that it can still do it. So it's refreshing the plane. But he said they do it once a month on average for every plane. It's required once a month per plane, but then sometimes they do it more often. But the pilots don't want to play anymore if they don't get to do anything. And number two is you want to keep them fresh. The pilots have to know, to what was pointed out here, pilots have to constantly do the repetition, do the things, make sure it's working, because he repeated the thing many of us have said in the past, which is, to err is human, but to really screw things up requires a computer, and he said a different word that I'm not going to say on the show, but anyway, and he just said it can get really, computers can do horrible things, and we saw that again. We saw that with Boeing many years later after I talked to this guy 15 years ago, whatever. But with the Boeing correction, with the new Boeing planes, the 737s that started nosediving, you basically had a plane that they built that was inherently unstable, and the computer was the only thing that keeps it in the air. And so when the computer didn't work, it didn't work. Anyway, just things to think about.
Fly by wire. Go ahead, Mitchell.
There's probably a lot of stuff that happens that it's probably just as well. We don't know what actually happened when we're sitting in an airplane. I sat in a first class seat once. I got lucky and was sitting next to a pilot. And all the way back from Florida, we chatted about the aircraft and different things that happened. And we made our approach into Philadelphia. And I know that we usually make that turn around New Jersey and line up on the main runway in Philadelphia. And we were coming in, we were just getting ready to flare, and all of a sudden, the pilot put all the power in the world on the aircraft, and we just went back like this and went up. And I looked over at the pilots next to me and said, that wasn't good. And I'm like, oh, well, what do you think just happened? And he said, well, we're doing a aborted landing. He said something obviously was on the ground or was going on with the aircraft, and we had to do it. So if the pilot, I'm not sure a computer could have reacted that fast, but apparently a plane had crossed our runway just as we were coming down, and it was too close for the pilot. So he decided to do a flyby or flyover, no-go, whatever they call it.
But what I will say is that there are many things in life that you would not do if you knew how dangerous it was. If you knew what the odds were. And there's many things that, when everything from how our governments protect us and how our, there's an enormous amount of, things that happen that if we knew what the actual data was, and actual threats were, we probably wouldn't leave our house.
Self-driving cars. Make me
driving cars. I was going to say, yeah.
Those are low compared to some of the other risks. Anyway, I can't see whether there's another person or not. We go to the next question because the last question got activated early.
I'll go ahead and weigh in on this one. Alex covered most of the points I was going to bring out. In the flight history of that report, though, the sensors on the landing strip were offline for some reason. So the airplane couldn't get the data to do the manual flying. And so, and I wonder if bringing it to, a media application, having different failovers of things that you rely on automation, knowing how to do them manually or having a backup for them is probably a good idea. I got the impression in school that, we'd have to, after the CME, we'd have to do like manual square roots because no one had a calculator, and we'd have to, figure these things out. Not so sure about the feasibility of those things, but being able to have a replacement for things that you can't do manually, I think redundancy will take over. I think is a lesson that we can learn. Let's go to our next question. Oops.
Did we lose Alex there?
I think we may have lost Alex. I'll read that.
All right. I'll read for you. Sky Gleason from Seattle, Washington. What in-theater summer movies have you seen recently? Thoughts?
Let's get back to Alex and go to Courtney.
I haven't seen too much recently. I saw Everything Everywhere All at Once. So that was enough because it was everything, everywhere, and all at once. It was pretty interesting. Ki-Hei Kwan, who was one of the leads in the film, who was a child actor previously. You saw him in Goonies, and you saw him as Short Round in the Indiana Jones second movie, I think. Still looks and sounds the same as he did as a child actor, which is hard to cope with because he plays an adult father in this movie. But the effects are very imaginative, and it's the movie is really crazy and fun to watch. And there's some great cameos of different actors that you weren't expecting to appear here and there in strange roles. So I enjoyed that a lot.
Yeah, I have to confess, I have not seen a single movie this summer. And I don't think anyone that's left on the panel has either. So let's go to our next question.
All right, next question in from Guy Cochran in Seattle. Do you want to see the new Atomos Zato Connect? I have one here ready to show.
Go ahead, John.
I want to see it first, Guy.
You want to see it before you make a remark?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy for $299. Like, they told us about this before it came out, and what I was excited about, and it's not released yet, is the NDI capability. So it'll soon be able to be a transcoder. So basically, you could take in an HDMI signal or a webcam and turn it into NDI. So it'll be like a problem solver as well. So think of it as a monitor, a recorder, a live streaming device, and then in the future it'll be an NDI transcoding machine. So it could be a nice tool to have around. But this is it. $299. It operates off those standard batteries that the Sony style. It has 2 USB ports, so you can feed this out to Zoom too. So if you wanted to use it as an in, you can feed you could feed it in. You could also use that USB port. It comes with this Ethernet adapter, so you can hardwire it. But otherwise, the antennas are to Wi-Fi. So you could hook this right up on. Right now, I have a Blackmagic Pocket Cinema camera feeding into it, and with my phone, I could be live streaming with this with really just 2 pushes. There's an HDMI in and out. So when I say you could do it with 2 pushes, there's a new thing called Atomos Cloud, and that's what I have this connected to. There's a little PIN number that you put in, and then you have the button right here that says go live. So if I push live, I've got it connected, and it'll stream up to YouTube. But right now, it doesn't do RTMP. It just does Twitch and YouTube. In the future, it'll do Facebook and custom RTMP. The menu is pretty simple. It's got ins, HDMI, USB, the outs, USB and HDMI, signals 1080. You could choose your network if you're using Wi-Fi, or if you're using, actually I better turn on Wi-Fi if I want it to stream. And then connected, yeah, it's not connected because, there we go. Should connect now. There it goes, now it's connecting. Yeah, you can't stream if you don't have a network. That's weird, it didn't tell me something was wrong. Anyways, you could set up some media, so you can put it, like a logo or something on if you want it. And then there's an SD card here on the side. And the color's not good on it. It's just 420. The files are really small, so it's not like going to be a ProRes recorder or anything like that. Look to the Shogun Connect for something like that. But overall, I mean, crazy value for $290. It's got quarter 20 on the top. And on the bottom. So use it as a monitor, use it as an encoder, push a stream out, use it as something you can send video into your laptop. And the USB ports are USB-C. I put, to hook up my Logitech C920 into it, I put one of those little USB-C to USB, one of these little adapters on there, so that way I can get my camera in there. And then there's another USB for power. So if you are concerned of running out of power with your Sony battery, you have your USB PD, which is what I've hooked up my big Anker battery to. So that's it. What do you think, John?
You answered my question. I was trying to differentiate this versus the Video Assist. I'm trying to create a 1U drawer that pulls out with 2 monitors in it that flip out like gull-wing doors, so that I can package those away. And so this is a pretty cool device supporting NDI. That's the real differentiator, right?
Yeah, the other one's going to be bigger, and it'll actually do frame.io as well. So that's really interesting that Atomos has their own cloud service. Right now, it's very basic, like I showed to you, but there's really not much to see except for I'd exposed my credentials, so I don't want to show it. But it basically is just your device. It shows you your key.
Password 1, 2, 3.
It's kind of like your Bitcoin wallet. It shows 3 phrases, and then you just got to put those in. So you want to see my Bitcoin wallet address too while I'm at it, John? he's putting up his thumb that you guys can't see it in the back end. But yeah, the other version, the more expensive version, will do frame.io, camera to cloud, so you can generate H.265 files on set. It'll shoot them up there with the time code. And they have another thing called air glue, which will suck the time code in from not just the sound devices that we saw when frame.io came on the show. Now you could do it for much less. Before it was like a $2,000 Teradek and a $8,000 recorder. Now you could do it with any recorder that'll generate time code and an Atomos Shogun Connect. So interesting times we're living in.
That's a UVS or UVC
compliant device in UVC. And out. So you can hook in a UVC and just go UVC, which would why have the device, except for if you want to see a bigger image, or if you want to add a graphic like a logo over the top. But I was shocked at how good. I just pointed out my window with, there's like a cow field back there with a C920. And I was like, what? That's the C920? I thought it was the BirdDog for a second. I didn't believe that a C920 could look that good passing through. But yeah, and then I pushed stream and it shot up to YouTube. So pretty amazing that you could take a Logitech C920 and send it to YouTube just in the palm of your hand with a cell phone with Wi-Fi as a hotspot.
Someone had showed us a UVC input device so they could plug in their ATEM, and I believe it's pretty close to that price.
Yeah, it's $180 versus this is $299. I was like, why wouldn't you get the monitor too, and then have this NDI future adapter? So it just depends on what you need, though. Yeah, it's a pretty cool device for the money.
Yeah, Courtney.
I was going to ask you, you said it records on the SD card. Does it record just ProRes, or does it do H.264 as well?
No, it's just H.264. So, and it's kind of sad because when you look at it, let me cut back to it. When you're streaming, you're stuck with its resolution that it sticks you in. But when
stream that's going up,
when you're just using it as a recorder, you do have this capability to say compression, and right now it's H.264. I hope in the future they'll change it to H.265. But there's an XQ. Let's see, compression format XQ. There's a medium, high quality, medium quality, low quality, and then XQ. So there's 4 flavors of that H.264 on there.
Different bit rates then, down to
but we can't see what they are. I'd have to record the files, or maybe they'll put it in the manual, but I didn't find it in the manual yet. They're not publishing it in the manual.
Okay, thanks.
Fantastic. And what's the availability of that, guy? They're pretty plentiful?
Yeah, they're in stock, ready to go. Order now.
Thanks. All right. Thanks for that demo. Let's go to our next question.
Peter Belbin in Houston, Texas. Are many of the participants in office hours current or past amateur radio license holders?
Go ahead, John.
KK7 BPD, there's a handful of us, about 10 of us or so. I actually took my license and did the practice test in after hours last year, at the end of last year. I use it for the telemetry we use on rockets. I had to get my ham radio license. And we have 2 ham radio questions right in a row, which is kind of interesting.
Fantastic. Courtney?
KE6HAJ, I have to always remember to renew my license every 10 years, because if you don't, they expire. And I've had to renew mine twice. So I'm heading into the 3rd renewal of the 30th year of my ham license, technician license.
You might be the senior, but let's see what Mitchell has to say.
CQ Field Day. Yeah, I let mine expire. WA8RJO.
Fantastic. We've got one more ham radio question. Mitchell?
Dennis Wojtek from New Kensington, Pennsylvania. Here's a question for ham radio guys. Do you prefer voice, code, or FT8?
Go ahead, John.
So we use 70 centimeter for telemetry for the rocket. So our flight computer has a radio built on it, and then we transmit that down to the ground. And then I've got a Yagi antenna, and we receive the data stream. And then we feed that into a computer, and then we have our own parser that parses the data out. So I have a Baofeng radio back here, but rarely use it for voice communication. So all telemetry related to rockets, but in the ham radio bands.
Courtney?
Yeah, I have a problem with voice. That's the problem, is unmuting. I prefer voice, of course, because I have a technician license. I learned code to get my license, but never used it. And code is not required on most modern licenses anymore. So the chances of finding somebody who can still communicate in Morse code are getting smaller and smaller every day. But only the hardcore hobbyists who aren't dead yet still use it. And FT8, I guess that's RTTY. I'm not sure.
Mitchell?
Yeah, I made the originally a first-class radio telephone license to operate radio stations and TV stations. Because I couldn't learn to code, I was just too lazy. But then I went and picked it up later on.
And John, did you say you just gotten your license for the telemetry for the rocket, or had you had it before?
No, well, VidRock we shot in 2001. That also used a ham radio license frequency. But one of the guys that worked on the project had his ham radio license, so I didn't have to get it. But now technician license does not require code anymore, and it's pretty easy. They give you all the questions, and if you practice the practice pool of exam questions, you'll pass. The proctored exam was interesting. I was talking to Mark before the show. They had 3 proctors on. And you have to take your web camera, and they want to see your entire work area. And then I had to cover all my other external monitors to my computer. And then they watch your screen sharing, and then they keep up activity monitor to see what apps you're running. So it's pretty well done. I was impressed with their their format of their online testing for the exam, and I passed.
Interesting. So it seems like there's some modern applications, and they're using modern proctoring to distribute those licenses. Let's go to our next question.
Matt Cool from Montreal, Canada. I just wanted to thank all of you for your endless commitment to office hours. It's still amazing. With everything starting up again, how do you all find the time?
Go ahead, Mitchell.
I have no social life.
That helps. Courtney?
That, and it's called retirement. Yeah, it's a wonderful thing. As you see all the gray hair here on the panel, that's one of the reasons.
Fantastic. John?
So the nice thing about office hours for our West Coasters is we're done by 9 a.m. And so we get this all out of the way. And by 9, the rest of the day is mine. So that's works out good.
Yeah, I know for many of us, we have, if we have a flexible schedule, we can budget in office hours. So for others, you'll see us on just the days that we can manage. Nice thing is with some of the themed days and subjects that we're covering on office hours, you'll start to see places where people can budget that time. So for example, if they're audio, they may turn up on a Tuesday, or the weekends is a nice time to show up and to start things new. So if you've not been on the panel or have joined in, the weekends is a good time to start. Guy, did you want to jump in as well?
Yeah, I mean, I just see this moving the whole industry forward. Having gone to NAB for over 20 years and seeing where we've gone and where we can go, to me, it's important to show up and move this thing forward. And even as we see some low numbers on the weekends, and you can probably hear my kids screaming downstairs, they want to go play, and I'm ready to go play with them. So I think it's important, though, to move this thing forward, keep the ball rolling, because we are doing great things and people are seeing it. And it's amazing to see some of the crews coming together. I saw the IBC crew starting to generate some of their back end stuff, and it's going to be impressive. Cloud workflows, all this stuff it's cutting edge, and it isn't documented anywhere. It's so new that even as I was doing my NDI performance network stuff last night, I was just like, man, we're sailing past some of the stuff that was new just not too long ago. And how do we use some of these tools like NDI remote and H.265 and SRT? There's just so many things that are cutting edge, and this is a safe place to break it. I don't mind going to a Cinegear and falling flat on my face, but can we make it so that's a better show for if we have to do the Emmys or the some other huge show where the stakes are mammothly huge? So to me, this is a safe place to just keep pushing that envelope.
Yeah, you make a good point there, Guy. Especially when we have these special projects, those are reasons for people to invest in those particular times. Sometimes you'll see people come and go as they get in busy swells, and so you'll see different faces pop in and out. But having some of those shows and things that we're doing not only gathers different faces and new people in, but it also adds different value to people coming here. I know that a lot of people use this as the research for their day job, so they can justify it that way. Let's go to our next question.
By the way, my name is Mitchell. I like taking long walks in the park, eating at DoorDash. And anyhow, next question. Peter Belbin from Houston, Texas. Anyone have experience with this link to simplify their remote connections to systems and equipment?
So the link that Peter used is for zerotier.com. This is a technology that some in our community have been using. It's sort of a middle point. I'm probably going to mess up the explanation. I believe it's a software-defined network is how it works. But feel free to correct me if I'm wrong about that. It's helpful in having connections to things that you have some roadblocks with firewalls or permissions, because it's able to connect things on a common point out. So you can build networks between things. I've used it to go between my cloud computer that I don't have the ability to open ports to be able to move networks. I can move things back and forth between my local computer and the cloud computer. pretty much anything that you can do on a network, you can do on zero tier. So I'm not an expert into it. I would suggest Taylor Sunderhouse to get a deeper scoop on that. But thanks for your question. Let's go to our next.
John Foltz from Selinsgrove, Pennsylvania. We use NDI encoders and Studio Tech Intercoms. It requires 2 Ethernet cables to each camera. I'm looking for a way to do that with a single camera. Is there a 2-port switch that provides power over Ethernet?
Go ahead, Mitch.
And I guess what he's telling us is that he needs to do power over Ethernet and connect each camera to a switch. If you need just the power over Ethernet, you can get a power over Ethernet injector, and some of those injectors have like a minimal number of ports on them. I don't have one handy, but I would show you one if I had the time.
Thanks, Mitchell. Let's go to our next question.
David Brady from New York City, and he says, looking for a contact management system for technophobes, something that collapses multiple spreadsheets and documents to track stuff like name, address, important dates, dues, etc. Any cloud-based solutions with a low barrier to entry for the panel users?
Interesting question, David. So, technophobes, I guess it would depend on how technophobic your use case is. John, do you have an idea?
So I've been using Airtable, which is think like Microsoft Access, but in the cloud. And so it gives you all those same kind of features. And then you have some ability to create different views and forms and stuff. Go take a look at Airtable, David.
Okay. There we go. We have a question for you. And our final question.
And it's from James Haldane in Vancouver, Canada. I'm thinking of getting a BirdDog BDP120. Anyone have one? How does it compare to the P200?
Guy? I think you're muted, Guy.
Zoom mute there, buddy.
Sorry. It comes down to sensor size. Courtney held up his finger like this, and I thought you were telling my kids to be quiet because that's what I've been doing. So it comes down to sensor size and then how much of a reach of zoom that you want, because the bigger one will do 30x. And this one behind me, the P200, really can go far. So it just depends on reach and then sensor size as far as look, but as far as how they show up on the network and how they react, and you can use, all the different controllers and whatnot, they're fine. So it comes down to how many do you need and what's your budget.
Very good. Mark?
Guy, are both of those full HDI or NDI?
They indeed are both full NDI. Yeah, and that's kind of BirdDog's secret sauce. And if you don't need full NDI, the Bolin. So Bolin makes the housing, the motors, and Sony makes a sensor, but you can buy almost the same camera from Bolin. If you don't need NDI, you can save a little bit of money if you just need SDI or just HDMI. Take a look at the Bolin offerings as well. You might save a couple $100 because BirdDog's specialty is the firmware, and so they make great firmware, great software. I didn't like them at first, but now I'm growing to love them. I mean, it's really powerful stuff.
And how do you spell that manufacturer, Guy?
Bolin, Bolin. In fact, it's funny because on the side right here it says Bolin. So on my BirdDog it says Bolin right here, right on the side.
Nice, appreciate that. Well, we've done it again, and we've reached the end of our show. So we want to thank all of our producers, those who are providing the content for the show and the questions that we've provided the answers. Thank you, our expert panel, for providing the content. Nice to see different faces here on the panel. And as our volunteers, we are 100% self-produced and always improving. So there's many things, different things that we can get involved in the production, in our community. And that's what we're going to head to now. We're going to head back to after hours. Till the next show.
Good show, Josh.
Yes, nice job, Josh.
Good job, Josh. Good job.
Nice job, everyone.
Mitchell, you thought you'd get away without whispering.
just because Alex wasn't here to whisper.
Thanks. That's truly spooky.
That's the way Mitchell hears it.
All right. Good night, everybody. Good morning. Good afternoon.